Take a look at any long-running video game franchise, and you'll notice that regardless of genre, they all have their ups and downs, with Tekken being no exception. Although there have been some truly head-scratching entries over the years.
This game is stupid.
Series developer Bandai Namco hit a colossal home run with Tekken 5, a game that many consider to be the greatest 3D fighter ever made. Believe it or not, but its arcade and PS2 releases are both over 20 years old now, so I wanted to see how the game holds up in a world where Tekken is now known for media management and manga guest characters. Fire up your old PS2 and practice those electrics, dear viewer, as we jump back into the world of Tekken 5. After Tekken 3 and Tag 1 both set the world on fire, I can only imagine how excited the fanbase must have been when Tekken 4 was announced. Oh yeah, we're getting Kazuya back in a mainline entry, and with some sick shades to boot. With a grittier aesthetic, experimental gameplay mechanics, and a development cycle so stressful that Katsuhiro Harada lost the hair on half his body, one would assume that the series' hot streak would continue as usual come its release in 2001. Heh. About that. Although it sold and reviewed well enough for an early 2000s fighting game, the fanbase thought it jumped the shark completely, resulting in unenthusiastic tournament support. For Namco, who had grown accustomed to drowning sorrows in a bottle of liquor, this marked the biggest failure in Tekken history, and it needed to be fixed ASAP. Following his resignation from the company due to stress and subsequent rehiring, Harada and co went back to the drawing board, analysing what made the previous games so successful and thinking about how they could further refine those elements for one that was brand new. For example, Tekken 4's uneven terrain gave it a sense of realism at the cost of gameplay consistency, so these were replaced by flat surfaces. Tag 1's strong movement and defensive tools were beloved by the community, so Tekken 5 was designed with these in mind too. The game's roster was based on fan feedback, with many popular fighters being all but guaranteed to return, along with niche picks who had small yet vocal player bases. Newcomers Asuka and Devil Jin aimed to replicate older gameplay styles that had been neglected in Tekken 4, whereas Feng and Raven were designed to provide something totally fresh. What's hilarious to me is that even though they went out of their way to include the iconic "Heihachi Mishima is dead" in the trailers, Namco went out of their way to tell the game's media that he was still alive. Time really is just a flat circle, huh?
Heihachi Mishima is completely dead.
Hell, they even included the arcade versions of Tekken 1 through 3 in the PS2 port just to please the fans. Look, I could keep expanding on all of this for hours, but the bottom line is that Namco's top priority was to kind of ignore Tekken 4 ever existed, and instead harken back to the halcyon days of the late 90s. Making use of the advanced System 256 arcade board, which also powered Time Crisis 3 and Capcom Fighting Evolution, yeesh. Tekken 5 featured Endorphin, a cutting-edge graphics technology that allowed characters to behave more realistically than ever before. In an interview featured on an old PS2 demo disc that has some wicked early 2000s camera work, Harada revealed that receiving player feedback from around the world played an integral role in guiding Namco's development process. Including PS2 controller ports in the arcade machine and designing more beginner-friendly characters were two major requests they received, along with extra home content to play around with. Speaking of which, Tekken 5 introduced character customization to the series. If you couldn't tell by now, the title's goal was to be as over-the-top as possible, with this phrasing being used by Harada in many pre-release interviews and trailers. As Tekken 5 was set to celebrate the franchise's 10th anniversary, the development team simply couldn't afford to release another disappointment. Competition within the 3D fighting game space was fierce after all, and I can't imagine Namco being too happy to lose even more of their market share. With the weight of the world on its shoulders, did Tekken 5's high-budget gamble pay off? You can bet your butt it did, as for the first time in a while, Tekken fans had an honest-to-god jank-free 3D fighter. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little, but we'll get into the broken stuff later, don't worry. For starters, Tekken's gameplay style remains perfectly intact. 4 attack buttons, 3 areas of the body that can be struck, a myriad of throws, and some devastating combos make up a bulk of what you'll be seeing in live matches. Thanks to how most, if not all types of attacks have at least one way to either evade or break out of them, players who have really put the time in can do so on reaction. This phenomenon is hardly exclusive to Tekken 5, of course, but the game's buttery smooth movement makes for a fantastic viewing experience, while also providing competitors with the tools needed to stay mobile. I mentioned earlier how Tekken 4's asymmetrical arenas were removed in favor of traditional level design, and although you could argue this was a regression in terms of innovation, I feel that it was the right thing to do overall. It sent a message that Namco was listening to the fans' criticisms and had shifted their development philosophy to reflect this. Plus, having a parking lot ceiling impact your launcher can really throw you off your game. Outside of the new crush mechanic that's now a series staple, I feel as though Tekken 5 is more or less a collection of pre-existing ideas that have been given even more polish. It's as if the developers made a checklist of specific gameplay details that fans enjoyed about Tekken 3 and Tag 1, and aimed to bring them back in their new engine. Such a concept also applies to its 32 character lineup, as fan favorites who were AWOL from Tekken 4 made their grand return here. The likes of Anna, Baek, Bruce, and Wang made Tekken 5 feel like a welcoming party where your favorite kangaroo just came home from college. Whether you're attempting risky backturn pressure with Raven, grappling until the sun goes down with King, or reminiscing upon a time where spiky-haired karate men weren't nerfed into the ground, Tekken's distinct fighting styles are better than ever. And I mean that literally, by the way, as the game balance is almost enough to give me a heart attack. Brian's easy yet damaging staple wall combos, Nina's insane up forward 1, Feng's quick back 1 and ridiculous frame data, Heihachi's monstrous 10-frame punishes, and Steve's infinite all come to mind. This last one even had to be banned from competitive play due to how consistent it was to perform. Watching archived tournament footage from yesteryear is the best way to see just how effective these strategies were in high-level competition. With all that being said, what I love most about Tekken 5's battle mechanics are that they contain enough gameplay depth to entertain the die-hard, frame data-obsessed hardcore players, while also being approachable enough for newcomers to enjoy. Seeing just how excited people get over executionally demanding combos is awesome. Combo length is another quality that I love, as unlike modern Tekken, where you have to wait 3 hours for one combo to finish, Tekken 5 gets the job done in record time. 3D fighters are known for their complex mind games involving lateral movement, and I find that having shorter combos allows more of these interactions to happen within a set. If we're talking strictly about gameplay, I don't think it's a controversial opinion to claim that Tekken 5 is the series' peak. Now look, I may be a Tekken 4 loyalist for that beautiful soundtrack, but I can't deny that its sequel hasn't aged a day. As a large portion of Tekken's fanbase was birthed out of those who bought the games back in the day to kick back and have fun unlocking characters, the franchise wouldn't be as popular if it didn't have engaging single-player content. With this in mind, does Tekken 5 measure up to the likes of what came before? Arcade Battle and Time Attack are your standard single-player fare. The former involves an infinite number of CPU-controlled opponents, and the latter is your standard arcade mode that concludes with Jinpachi, the final boss. Aside from how difficult the eldest Mishima can be to defeat at times, there's nothing that unique here, it plays out in a pretty standard way. Survival mode is similar in that it's yet another gauntlet of enemies, but it ends once you run out of health. Again, nothing too crazy. Versus battle is where you fight other people, obviously, and I can imagine that many players spent thousands of hours with this one mode back in the day. Story Battle is akin to a character-specific campaign mode, with fully realized intro, middle, and outro sequences. Extensive character backstories and relationships have been a part of Tekken from day one, so it's amazing to see Tekken 5 continue to treat its roster as living, breathing people who realistically could exist within this wacky world. Tekken 4's serious, and somewhat grim tone, where Armor King gets one-shotted in a bar fight, was replaced by a more colourful, joyous presentation. The game still has its serious moments, mind you, but after taking the time to watch these ending cutscenes, I realised just how much comic relief there is. Like with the gameplay mechanics, these feel like a deliberate harkening back to when Tekken wasn't afraid to embrace its silly side. Moving over to Team Battle now, and oh man, I had so much fun with this as a kid. If you've never been fortunate enough to play this mode with friends or family, you create teams of up to 8 fighters and keep going until one team has been eliminated, King of Fighters style. I always loved how you could pick a fighter for everybody in the room and then pass the controller around to get even more people involved. If you keep getting your butt kicked by ambiguous grizzly bear strings, practice mode is the place to be. Unlike nowadays, where you can find the most minute details of Kazuya's impossibly spiky hairdo in the game settings, Tekken 5 was released during a much simpler time. A time where the concept of in-game frame data and replay takeovers only existed in people's wildest dreams. Honestly, I think Virtua Fighter 4's comprehensive tutorials have Tekken 5 beat, because at least that game actually, teaches you how to play. I mentioned character customization before, and to go into more detail, it's not like modern Tekken where you can freely alter the colors of individual costume parts. Rather, there are 4 parts of the body and 3 color tabs you can choose to play around with. Although these are pretty restrictive, there simply aren't many options to choose from. With that said, I admittedly had a pretty good time making Anna look like an extra from Eyes Wide Shut. It's great that Namco allowed the player base to personalize their favorite characters, but it feels more like a prototype of something larger than a fully realized customization suite. As mentioned before, arcade history not only contains Tekkens 1 through 3, but also Starblade, a sci-fi rail shooter. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's one of the best rail shooters I've ever played or anything like that, but hey, it's a free bonus, so who am I to complain? Finally, Devil Within is a 3D action platformer, and aside from having a really edgy 2000s title screen, it's just kind of okay, I guess. Running around with Jin and beating up bad guys with full 3D movement is cool for around 5 minutes, but the controls are way too clunky for me to finish every level. I'll give Namco credit for evolving the traditional Tekken Force formula into something more ambitious though. After all, they went out of their way to develop this strictly to make the fans happy. Outside of its mostly predictable nature, Tekken 5's content contains some surprising tricks up its sleeves. Even after all this time has passed, I still had a lot of fun messing around with its single-player offerings while recording footage. Once the hype train had reached its destination and allowed players to take in the sights, their immediate response was a direct 180 from what Tekken 4 had garnered. Seriously, you would think that game had committed war crimes based on how people spoke about it. If it wasn't obvious by now, everything that Tekken 5 brought to the table was viewed as a significant improvement by both fans and critics. Well, except for Devil Within. Sorry, Jin. This is all well and good, but I'm more interested in how it all came together to save, and even improve, Tekken's reputation going forward. Following Tekken 4's sharp decline in sales, Tekken 5 brought the franchise back on track, selling 6 million copies by 2009. Currently, the title sits at 9.43 million copies sold, making it the second best-selling entry in the series. Wow, it's almost like giving the fans what they want will lead to higher sales. What a concept! Had the game failed to meet expectations and continue its older brother's downward spiral, any potential continuations would have suffered from budget restrictions, as well as sending a wider message about Tekken's relevance within the fighting game space. The normalization of high-definition game development during the mid-2000s provided players with greater visuals, audio, and gameplay features than ever before. However, this required a buttload of resources, and when you take into account how niche the fighting game genre is within the wider market, you start to see why making a profit is so important. Vanilla Tekken 5's overwhelming success convinced Namco to continue support going forward. The likes of Asuka, Lily, Raven, Feng, and Dragunov have become series staples, with all of them appearing in Tekken 8. A mere 2 years after Dark Resurrection, Tekken 6 was released, and the series never suffered any more setbacks from that point onwards. Woohoo! Okay, obviously this is a lie, but it's nice that Panda got to briefly enjoy the benefits of commercial success. Before we wrap up, I would like to mention Tekken 5's competitive scene. Taking a time machine back to the mid-2000s, please God let me do this, reveals massive Japanese and South Korean tournament scenes, and it's not an understatement to say that the game was huge in Asia. If you would like to read through these specifics, the Liquipedia website has you covered, but the gist of it is that there were a lot of people playing this game, dude. Japanese tournaments were being televised for goodness sake. Over in Korea, Nee used his skills from playing Tag 1 and Tekken 4 in the arcades and developed them even further for Tekken 5, leading to his eventual status as arguably the greatest Tekken player of all time. After the fanbase's apathetic reaction to Tekken 4, Namco's response came as a devastating uppercut, one that defined the series as we know it today. With how Tekken 8 is often criticized for its focus on hyper-aggression and a litany of crazy tracking, I wonder if a potential Tekken 9 will once again course-correct the franchise into greener pastures. Katsuhiro Harada has once again departed Namco, and without his guiding hand to influence future development, who knows what the next evolution of Tekken will look like. In any case, if you can get your hands on Tekken 5, I really recommend giving it a shot for some PS2 nostalgia. If you can look past the glaring balance issues, unlocking characters and killing time by browsing through the gallery will never get old. Okay, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you and your time, and I hope you had fun. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.